Hey you're watching a clip from the DynamiteGizmo Podcast. This is not the full episode, but if you want to see the full episode, make sure to click the link in the description. And remember, like, comment, subscribe. Do it now. Here's the clip. We're going to have to talk about Khamzat Chimaev, who is the current middleweight champion of this world. I remember when Sean Strickland lost the title to Dricus du Plessis, and I said to myself, Khamzat is going to be the next guy to hold that belt. I don't know why I said it at that time. It was just one of those thoughts that stuck in my head. And sure enough, it happened. Not only did Khamzat Chimaev win the title, but the man is still undefeated overall. Currently sitting at 15-0. And the craziest part is, the only time he has ever seen rounds 4 and 5 was in his last fight against Dricus when he claimed the title. Before that fight, a lot of people made the argument that Khamzat had bad cardio, and that if he was going to win fights, he needed to get the job done early. Oh, my neck. People would use the Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman fights as examples. And although it did look like he was slowing down in those fights, he still got the job done. Close fights, absolutely, but he still won. And nowadays, he's training at the training lab with Coach Cal, who is apparently an absolute expert when it comes to cardio conditioning and sports science. Not apparently, he is. Oliver, quit it. But honestly, I'd make the argument that Khamzat always had decent cardio. People just never got to truly experience it because most of his fights didn't go long enough. Sure, he got tired in some earlier fights, but who doesn't when you're moving around that much? That's not abnormal at all. And honestly, you should get tired. If you're not getting tired, you're not trying hard enough. And when you look at Khamzat's career, the names he's fought are pretty insane, dude. Guys like Li Jing Liang, Gilbert Burns, Kevin Holland, Kamaru Usman, Robert Whittaker, and DDP. One of the biggest fights that never happened was the Leon Edwards fight, which got canceled 3 separate times back-to-back because of different COVID issues. And then, of course, there was Nate Diaz's retirement fight, where Khamzat showed up 7.5 pounds overweight. And despite all the cancellations throughout his career, whether it was due to health issues or his own mistakes, he still remained a dominant force and climbed all the way to the title. There were definitely moments where people started losing confidence in him, not because they doubted his skill, but because he was becoming unreliable. Even after the Edwards and Diaz situation, he still dealt with health issues before the Whittaker fight, and that matchup had to be rescheduled as well. But eventually he came through and proved he was still capable of becoming a champion. Now, when you actually look at Khamzat's fighting style, it's honestly hard to imagine somebody beating this man. His pressure is insane. The guy is an absolute master of wrestling and grappling. He can literally shoot from across the octagon and take someone down at almost any moment in the fight. And even though his striking can absolutely do damage, a lot of the time it's really just there as a distraction. He throws strikes to create openings so he can explode in, grab a hold of you, and take you down before you even realized what happened. And once he gets you to the ground, there really isn't much you can do. Out of his 9 UFC fights, the majority of them ended by submission. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call him a submission artist, but he is absolutely a grappling and wrestling artist. Honestly, he may even be the best wrestler in the sport right now. And just like Strickland, Khamzat also gets criticized for his style. Some people find it boring. So what's interesting here is that we have 2 fighters who individually some people would consider boring stylistically on both ends. But when you put them together, because of who they are, how they fight, and the genuine hatred between them, this becomes one of the most hyped fights we've had all year. We already know the things Sean has said about Khamzat, but what about what Khamzat has said about Sean? Honestly, not a whole lot. At least not yet. Because Khamzat isn't really the type to go off during interviews or behind someone's back. Khamzat handles things face to face. And so far during interviews, he's actually been pretty calm, quiet, and very soft-spoken. We haven't really seen these two face to face yet since the fight was announced. And right now, Khamzat looks composed. But I don't really think we can fully judge that yet. Because we've seen him snap before. With Holland, Diaz, Ian Gary, Burns, Paulo Costa. The second he feels disrespected directly to his face, his entire demeanor changes. He doesn't really care what Sean says in interviews. Look at how calm he's been in response so far. But once we get the press conference, once they're walking past each other backstage, once we get the ceremonial weigh-ins, that's when things could possibly explode. And if it is going to explode, that is where it will happen. And I really want people to pay attention to what we have here. Because honestly, it's not even just the fight itself that's exciting, it's the build-up. Sure, the fight absolutely has potential, we all know that, but what happens leading up to the fight might honestly be just as entertaining. This is something the UFC has been missing for a long time. We rarely get this kind of genuine tension anymore. Back in the day, the press conferences were almost as exciting as the actual fights. That build-up was a huge part of what made these fights feel massive. And with this matchup, we finally have that feeling again. Now, when it comes to the actual fight itself, the second this fight got announced, my immediate reaction was, well, of course Khamzat's going to win. How could he not? Because when you look at the middleweight rankings, there really aren't many guys that seem capable of dealing with Khamzat's level of wrestling. Maybe someone like RDR, but even then, who knows? Strickland versus Khamzat is an amazing fight for a lot of reasons. But the biggest one is the personal beef between them. This honestly feels like one of those fights that either ends really early or drags out into a slower decision similar to the Dricus fight, if things go Khamzat's way. And honestly, based purely off gut feeling, that's kind of where my head is at right now. Now, if Khamzat wins this fight, he's already talked about potentially moving up to light heavyweight afterward, which could potentially set up a future fight with Carlos Ulberg, and then maybe Yuri Prohaski. Especially considering Khamzat tends to be inactive between fights, and Ulberg is expected to be out for a while with injury anyway, which would give that matchup time to build naturally, unless they do an interim title. And when you really look at Khamzat's career, the guy has never been defeated, not inside the UFC, not outside the UFC. So just imagine how massive it would be if Sean Strickland became the first man to end that streak. But honestly, I don't know if Sean can do it. I really don't. Talk is cheap, and Sean does a lot of talking. And right now, I honestly don't know if there's anybody at middleweight, or even light heavyweight for that matter, capable of beating Khamzat. The only way I could see it happening is through some sort of crazy fluke situation similar to Van versus Pantoja. Now let me ask you this. Do you think anybody in the UFC can realistically stop Khamzat Chimaev right now? Or is he on his way to becoming one of the most dominant champions we've ever seen?
Tap here to watch the full episode of the Dynamite Gizmo Podcast.